Welcome, guys, to Outlier Fantasy. My name is Turtle. I am here with a very special guest today who may not need an introduction, but being that he's new, I will give him an introduction. This is someone that I rate as almost a fantasy football genius, a genius by his colleagues as well, given that he has a PhD and is a doctor. Give it up for none other than my friend, Dr. Eber. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Always, man. I appreciate you having me. PhD in fantasy football and MD in real life.
Hey, I love it. I love it.
Different doctorate, different doctorate. But I'll
For
take the
sure.
PhD in fantasy football all day, every day.
I love it. That's why I have to have you on the show, is because you're different. You think outside the box, and that's why you're on this channel and we're finally getting this video done together.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. I don't think you can stick to one plan, because things aren't always going to go your way, especially in a draft. In home leagues, you think you know what a guy's going to do, but you always got to be thinking a few steps ahead.
For sure. Zag when they're zigging, absolutely.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to pull that trigger.
For sure. Being that you are somebody that I highly trust and is someone that's very much tied to the Miami Dolphins organization, would you like to start today by talking about some of the key Dolphins players that could mean something in fantasy for us this season?
For sure, and just like I mean, it's just what I witnessed throughout going to training camp, just being like a season ticket member. It's not like anything too crazy, but it is something I witnessed with my own eyes. So we'll take it for what that is. So we had Tyreek's injury with that. I mean, I think that happened when he was doing like drills against the Commanders. It was like goal line. He was running like a fade or some route, ended up landing weird like on his hand or something like that. Came off like right away holding that thing. But overall, I think he's going to be good. Kind of like what the coaching staff alluded to. Granted, I don't know anything about his injury, but this, like I said, what I saw. So I think he should be good. I think guys like Waddle should be good. I think that's a great third round, fourth round receiver to target. One thing that's intriguing to me, not many people realize it from the last preseason game. Devon Achane only had like one or two effective plays, one of them being with Mike White, the other one just being that run. I don't know like his current ADP, if that's the usage we've like I know it's preseason, we take it with a grain of salt, doesn't mean anything.
For sure.
But he's been lighting it up in practice. I think Jalen Wright, if you want someone like in the way later rounds, if dynasty, whatever format you are, he's just a good guy to grab if you have any of the Dolphins backs because we all know they tend to be on the more fragile side.
For sure. Luckily, Raheem Mostert was able to play at least most of the games, if not all of the games, which is usually not something that we're used to seeing from somebody like Raheem Mostert. Given his
Exactly.
age and given his mileage or workload, it could be, a situation where we see an injury, unfortunately. Obviously, not wishing for that, of
Yeah.
course. But if you're going to take a Dolphins running back, it's good to know that we like Jalen Wright. Even if it's not a year one impact, if you play in dynasty formats or looking to just get an idea of what the Dolphins offense could look like in the future, that Jalen Wright could be a part of something like that.
Right. And I don't think he's gonna have that immediate impact. Raheem's one. And Achan is that 1B. Raheem's going to be that bruiser. He had a phenomenal year. He looks good. It's just like again, we kind of worry about age, but he doesn't have as much mileage as we like to say as the other guys. But Achan, he looks more like slot receiver, receiving back, but he can still take it when he needs to. So for sure, I think they're appropriately getting drafted for like a PPR league. One sleeper that we can kind of talk about who I think makes his way into that top 10 tight end range or has that ability is Jonnu Smith.
Now, Jonnu Smith is somebody that I personally, not saying I was banging the drum for you must
Yeah.
draft this guy, but I've always seen the potential, given that in Mike McDaniel's vertical offense, we get none other than a straight vertical tight end, which is something they've been lacking. Not to say that Durham Smythe isn't impactful in his role as a run blocker, of course, but to have somebody like a Jonnu Smith that you can design plays for while there's going to be safety help over the top for both Waddle and Tyreek Hill. It kind of leaves the middle of the field to have Jonnu just play around and have all different types of roles. Maybe he won't be like a Joker role where they put him out at like wide receiver and have him run like wide receiver type routes, but as somebody that can just burn you straight down the field, I feel like he definitely has an interesting potential and an interesting value because it really doesn't cost you anything to draft him.
Right, right. And like being at practice and just seeing like what all the like amazing beat writers that they have and like the people that cover the team, the videos that come out, like definitely got to give credit to them because like what we're seeing, this man's running across like in the backfield, getting direct snaps from the quarterback and around, and he's been scoring on it. Granted, he doesn't have that sideline to sideline speed that you would think he does because he has more straight line speed. And anybody who's played football understands the game of football. That's it's kind of different. And you aim to have both, but ideally you have one more than the other. So he does get caught quite frequently, but he's been forming a better connection with Tua, and he's a been a primary target in that red zone area. They've been working him a lot, and like the videos I saw today, he was cooking Buccaneers DBs all day.
He does have the potential, of course, to make a nice, strong fantasy impact if given the opportunity. But like we've mentioned before off camera, that given that Durham Smythe is such an excellent run blocker and so much of what the Miami Dolphins want to do, whether it's end arounds, whether it's play action, or just running the football, they're going to need to play Durham Smythe. So the only downfall of, putting all your eggs in the Jonnu Smith basket is that he might not be the tight end that plays the most snaps this season. Is that fair to say?
Agreed, 100%. Smythe is so versatile for this offense. When they need him to catch the ball, he's there to catch the ball. He can be an extra lineman, he can block on the run, and he can just be your multi-purpose tight end. And Jonnu is more of like a pass catcher, and he complements that role even better. He's like a fourth wide receiver if you want to go four wide. He can block when he needs to be, but like Smythe is such a Swiss Army man for this offense, and he understands this offense really well, and it's predicated on timing. So definitely he takes the upper hand, and exactly it's going to cap Jonnu's full upside. But even then, we saw with Jonnu I think it was like 2 seasons ago, when he was him and Kyle Pitts in the Arthur Smith offense, like he was feasting a little bit. He made it like to that 11-10 mark for tight end, which is not bad if you really want to punt the position and focus on building assets elsewhere.
We kind of floated around the topic of Tua Tagovailoa and skated around back to Jonnu Smith, but I do want to ask you about Tua because I'm somebody that honestly loves drafting quarterbacks late. So Tua is somebody that I have my eyes on. I'm hearing that he's skinnier now, which could end up being something that, is something that's a benefit to him. But I want to ask, play devil's advocate here. Do you think that having a more slender frame could impact his injury? Last year, we didn't see him get injured. Maybe this year, with a little less weight on him, it's possible that, like, there's a rib fracture or something along the way in terms of how many times he's going to drop back and potentially get hit.
Right. I mean, me personally, just like you, I love Tua. I mean, I'm a big fan of the kid, and he's kind of like a man now because, but he's a baller. He has that mentality like, I'm gonna win and I'm gonna succeed no matter what anybody in this room thinks. And I think he translates that to the football field, and he translates that to a fantasy football team because he's always pushing himself. So he's always going to be producing. He has Reek, he has Waddle. So he's always going to be making points. In terms of the weight loss, I mean, his throwing mechanics look so much better. I think he's actually more solid. So yes, he lost weight, but I think he actually has more muscle now from a mental standpoint. He's trusting his hip. That throwing motion's there, so we don't have to worry about that. His mechanics and his fundamentals have improved so much that I think he's just gonna ball out this year. So I think if you want to punt the quarterback position, he's somebody you can take probably like round 10, 11.
For sure. For somebody like Tua, he maybe is like ranked if you play like a 12-team league as like a second quarterback, but he
Right.
definitely has just as good of an upside as anybody else in that kind of next tier to finish at like back
Agreed.
end, QB1. I'm not going to say that he's got the potential and the ability, even though he plays in a very fantasy friendly system, to finish like top five, top six, but QB8 is just as realistic as any of the other guys going around him at his ADP.
Yeah, I'll say this thing for Tua and this offense as a whole. We've seen them struggle like on the road in those big games, right? And Tua usually fantasy wise and just real football wise, he balls out against like the good teams, but the lower tier teams, if that makes sense. And it's like we don't really see him produce. We see like maybe 178 and like maybe a touchdown against the better teams. But I feel like if they can fix that, I think we can see a top five finish from the guy.
Being that we're already talking about quarterbacks, are there other quarterbacks that you feel like, maybe it's not like a QB2 that's going to break into the QB1 tier, but a QB that you feel like is a little underpriced at his ADP, feeling that he's somebody that could finish a lot higher than what he's being drafted at?
I mean, I would say Pat Mahomes. I mean, yes, that's a top three guy, but if you like, I look at Sleeper, I look at Underdog, I look at Fantasy Pros, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, right? But where are they going? Usually the beginning of the fourth or the back half of the fourth, depending. Sometimes people will take him in the third, right? But you got Pat Mahomes going around five. So it's like I think that's a bargain. I think he supersedes all those guys. I mean, do I think Hurts is good? Yes, but has he shown us enough to be like, you know what, I'm going to take him with a top like my first four picks? I don't know. He has the rushing ability, sure, but new OC, right? Then Josh Allen, he's lost a lot of weapons to I understand the rushing ability as well, which is huge for touchdowns, and I think he deserves to go in that same thing. But I think Mahomes with Kelsey, with Worthy, with Rice, I mean Pacheco, they're just a juggernaut, and until proven otherwise, I think he should be going above all those guys.
I like it. I agree with you. Well, I don't want to say it's a hot take, but it's definitely not a popular take that people feel like Patrick Mahomes is being undervalued because, like you said, he's going high in the QB rankings. He's probably
Top,
third
yeah.
to that top two
Mhm.
guys. And the top two guys, realistically, are only top two guys because, like you mentioned, they both have rushing upside to,
Mhm.
score 12 plus touchdowns on the ground in a season on top of whatever they're going to throw for. So I do get the argument of having a Patrick Mahomes at one, but what are your thoughts about somebody like Kyler Murray, who's, he's kind of like towards the back end of the QB1 range, but if,
Yeah.
reports are coming out, they're saying he looks really good. Obviously, we can't take reports as gospel or take them at full face value. What are your thoughts about somebody like Kyler Murray, who's being drafted a lot lower than what his potential could be and what he's finished in the past?
Agreed with that take in the sense of like I feel like you're sitting in my head and like you're in there because on everything I was just like, yo, Kyler Murray's the next quarterback we should probably talk about. And here you are bringing him up, so I think that's actually crazy, the telepathy there. I agree. I think he's has the rushing upside. He showed us that when he has that wide receiver one and he's healthy, he really trusts his knee. He can ball with the best of them. And he's good. Yes, he's undersized, whatever it may be. He has a new system. He has a new shiny weapon. He has a up and coming tight end. His running game is pretty solid. His line is okay. Like he has all the tools to succeed. I think Jonathan Gannon believes in him, and I think he's undervalued. Like you're getting a guy with the rushing ability of Hurts and Allen and the playmaking. I think he has better playmakers, maybe besides Hurts, he doesn't, but he definitely has better playmakers than Josh Allen. He's up there. I mean, Lamar Jackson doesn't really have huge, like I put him in that top four, top five. Like he should be the next guy taken. Maybe Stroud, you argue, because of his weapons too.
I feel like, you know me, I am one of maybe the biggest Lamar Jackson fans out there. But in
Mhm.
terms of drafting him where he's going, I
Mhm.
don't know if I really love it at its current price point because I feel like, yes, we want a rushing quarterback, but we don't want a rushing quarterback that's not going to be rushing when it's goal to go or red zone situations where he actually has a chance to score a touchdown. Like, of course, he could break a 52-yard touchdown off at any single moment in a game, especially when it's, RPO concepts with somebody like Derrick Henry and it's somebody you got to stack the box for. But being that Todd Monken has kind of like shifted the philosophy to throwing a little more, I feel
Mhm.
like we should be, evaluating Lamar more as what's his
Pass.
upside as a passer versus what's his upside as a rusher. Somebody like Lamar Jackson, who's kind of like thrown right in the pit. You can't obviously rank him as like a QB6, QB7 because he just won the MVP. He's obviously a special talent. For me to go and want to draft him at his price currently, I think I'm kind of sitting away from that one and I'm saying I'm good.
I agree. Someone else who I want, but there's so much like cloudiness and haziness is Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow, if healthy, has a phenomenal year. I think he's just gonna ball. That's just who he is. You have different reports coming out that he's still hurt or he's not over his injury. So it's just like, I don't know. Plus Jamar Chase is holding out. T. Higgins looks awesome. I mean, I'm a big fan of T. Higgins, although people are skeptical about him. But what I'm saying for quarterback conversation, I think he's poised to have a good year and get on track to be the Joe Burrow we know. Can he stay healthy? Concerns with Tua, can he stay healthy?
I totally agree with that. I feel like obviously Joe Burrow plays a full 17 games. The floor is probably QB5, realistically. Like, he's going
Okay.
to be like top five guy. The issue is obviously injuries. Anybody can have the flaw of can they stay healthy, but some unfortunately have it more than others, which is just reality.
Right.
But if you were to go take somebody like Joe Burrow, do you feel like, maybe in a 12-man league or a 14-man league, you almost have to make sure you draft an insurance policy like a Jared Goff later on? And then could that be a little dicey? Whereas, like, I have to use two quality picks on quarterbacks, but I'm only going to be able to start one in a one QB league.
Exactly. And it takes into account it's like you're in a 12-man league, so that you're not up for a while. So you're about to invest one pick into a quarterback that you're not 100% certain about. If he's healthy, yeah, 100% take him, no doubt about it, move on. That's not the debate that I'm having. It's the uncertainty about him. And it's like you want to invest in, like you said, two picks, two valuable picks in a draft that's more people. The player pool is more broad, and you're taking those. It's like you can't do that. You can't afford to do that because it's like a recipe for disaster. You're basically investing let's say a seventh round and a 10th round pick on two quarterbacks.
And is it fair to question that, maybe we don't see the same kind of high-flying Cincinnati Bengals offense as we're used to seeing with new coordinators in place?
I would say the core of that offense stays the same. Granted, I don't know much about their offensive coordinator, the new one, but I have to imagine that the head coach didn't change. So I don't think the scheme is going to change because your quarterback remained the same. Your receivers are primarily the same. You just drafted a guy like Jermaine Burton. So I don't think, if anything, I think it's going to be equally as explosive. The only thing is running back there. I don't know, like Zach Moss, Chase Brown. Do you avoid him? Do you take him? Where do you go there? If we're talking about that offense as a whole.
For sure. I feel like this is a great question, but I
Mhm.
feel like this could wind up being a, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren situation where we know this is an offense that is probably going to end up pushing the ball into the end zone with their backs because
Mhm.
they got a lot of that value out of Joe Mixon in last year. You can take Zach Moss knowing he's going to be that bully guy who finds his way into the end zone on the ground. But Chase Brown, if you play in a PPR league, could kind of fit that Jalen Warren role as somebody that catch passes out of the backfield. Maybe doesn't have high rushing yardage totals every single week, but somehow you look week to week and you're like, oh, I got 13.6, I got 12.9. Like I can keep playing him as long as he
Oh, no.
put up, double digit numbers.
For sure. Given like going back to like the OG question that the Bengals offense, I think they'll be fine. Given just the health of everybody and they still got two sick receivers, they got running backs. They still have the tools to succeed. I'm going off the other guy you mentioned, Jalen Warren. I don't know, there was some injury news with him. I think that just gives Najee even more boost. I can't say I love Najee this year. If he's there at the right price, I take him. I'm not someone who's like Najee. I don't love the thought of it because there's a guy literally breathing down his neck trying to take his job. But the positive is Arthur Smith and the ability to run the ball, and they love to do it. Set up the play action pass. And not knowing your quarterback situation, sure, they're both ballers, but you just want to lean on the run that much more.
I agree with that, but I have to admit that I love Najee Harris at his price point this
At
season in
value,
terms of
yes.
ADP
Hmm.
because I know that if I decide that the draft is looking mighty fine at wide receiver early on and I'm like, oh, you know what? I only have one running back on my team. I could wait back and take Najee Harris, who has the potential to be somebody who finishes as a top 20 running back. I'm not saying that that's in the cards or the likelihood given that you just mentioned all these things like, new coordinator, we don't really know I mean, we know that they're going to run the ball, but we don't know exactly how everything's going to be painted,
Yeah,
in
exactly.
front of us in the landscape of things. So obviously there are going to be concerns. People are worried that Najee is getting like slower and slower, but I feel like this is somebody that we know to be someone who is a guy who takes in a lot of volume. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to be the fastest guy. Like Joe Mixon was never the fastest running back, but always gave us solid, fantasy production just because of the volume that he was given in Cincinnati from year to year.
I agree. And the other thing is like if we look back at just Najee, I'm pretty sure he had a good rookie year, like an okay year, like wasn't bad. And then he had an injury, and then he had the Liz Frank injury, and he just hasn't been healthy. And this is like the first time, the first summer that we're not really hearing that he's really has any injuries or anything that's lingering. So I mean, this could be really the first year that we see, besides his rookie year, a healthy Najee Harris, which could be different, which can be exciting.
Is that normally it would have taken you a pretty early pick to land him, whether he was a rookie and you knew he was going to be the starter or coming off a really strong rookie season in year two or even in year three. This is like a guy that, really didn't go no lower than the fourth round. And now I'm going to be able to get him in like the sixth, seventh round. I feel like
Yeah.
that at that point is a value because I'm just going to be able to stash somebody that could wind up being a pretty strong starting running back. But because of the past, like you mentioned, his injuries, people feel a little disappointed and, feel like there's more to be desired with somebody like Najee Harris. Given his price point, if you're somebody that winds up fading the running back position, quite a lot in your first few rounds, I feel like you could look to Najee as somebody that could just be like a backbone of your running back depth room.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. He's definitely a good pick at his price, and there's no like some question marks, but overall, it's like a solid value.
Is it fair to say that any running back you'd probably take in that tier also comes with their own question marks? Because I feel like that's kind of why I would lean towards Najee Harris versus the field. Because usually, if you don't love somebody, it's because you
Right.
love another talent or player more. But I feel like in Najee's case, I don't love anyone else really going around that ADP that I feel like I should be hand over fist choosing over Najee Harris. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the guys going around that ADP, Ramondre Stevenson, comes to mind, plus or minus David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift, Raheem Mostert, Zamir White. Of the people that I just named besides Zamir White, all those guys share a backfield with another back that's going a little higher or close to that range. DeAndre Swift, I still don't believe that Khalil Herbert and Roshan Johnson are not playing. Ramondre Stevenson, he can catch, but you also have to face it fat like tie in Antonio Gibson on those third downs, those passing downs if they're down. He's shown he can pass block too, so he has value. And then Raheem, you have Devon Achane. So of those guys, I feel like they're all equally in the correct tier, and whichever one you go with, I'd probably say David Montgomery first, Raheem, Ramondre, Swift, and Najee Harris. That's my personal ranking of them. But I feel like they're almost carbon copy images of each other, except some have higher upsides. There's like also like when you think about the rounds and the later rounds, who's your like standout wide receiver that you've seen falling or that you think people should reach on?
Well, I kind of feel like I have different answers for different parts of that question.
Right.
Somebody that I'm willing to reach on, he does currently have an injury that he's fighting through in training camp, but I'm not too concerned about a turf toe injury right now because we still have plenty of time to really recover from that. And I really would recommend reaching on a guy like Curtis Samuel. I feel like in terms of the Buffalo Bills offense, of course, we have Dalton Kincaid is going to lead the way in targets. Keon Coleman was invested with a first round pick, and we do expect him to get a lot of targets. But for somebody like a Curtis Samuel, just a slot guy that absolutely knows his role and has been a baller no matter where they've dropped him. I'm sure a lot of people thought he was set to die and his career was going to end in a place like Washington, but he ended up being fantasy valuable. Now imagine him with the best QB play of his career, probably. We're
Yeah, for
going to
sure.
see a guy that has the potential to kind of break out and be worth way more than what his ADP is.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you also got like Shakir in that offense, and I think he had like I mean he showed flashes last year. I mean, this is by no means like you should really go out and draft this guy. But I'm saying if Curtis Samuel's hurt, I feel like he steps up in that role. So definitely something to keep an eye on. But I do agree with that in terms of like sleeper. He has that upside. I'm very adamant about Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, I've ex definitely expressed that I think he's gonna ball out. I mean, he's shown ability and the volume is there for him. If I were to reach on anybody and maybe like a Rashi Rice, given everything that happened. I don't know if a suspension's coming. I don't think so.
No.
And he's a guy that you should take like probably round 6, 5.
Yeah, I would say I'm comfortable with taking him in round five, to be honest. I'm not really so worried about a suspension looming. His court sentence is the day after a primetime game against the LA Chargers.
Hmm.
So, let's be honest with the situation. Is he gonna hop on a plane after a big time
Exactly.
primetime victory and be like, oh, I gotta go to Dallas and I gotta
No.
I gotta go to court now, guys. I'll see you later. Like, probably not gonna end up happening this year, a suspension. Even if he was like, that's it, guys, I'm going to Dallas, in week 13, I'm gonna hop on a plane and get suspended for 3 games. You just had 12 games of Rashee Rice as, second in command in targets behind Travis Kelce, and you're in a dynamic offense. So there's a lot to be loved. And I feel like even if there is a suspension, you could feel comfortable about reaching on a guy like Rashee Rice. It's very interesting that you brought up Brian Thomas Jr. because not only have you persuaded me more into Brian Thomas, not saying I didn't like Brian Thomas at all in
Right,
the
right, right.
beginning, but I am loving what I see out of Brian Thomas. I don't know if I called them sleepers or not, but I'm willing to draft all the rookie wide receivers really above their ADP. Granted, guys are going to take Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors early. I'm fine with that. If I miss out on them, cool, it's all good. But that Rome Odunze, the Lad McConkey, the Brian Thomas Jr., and we just mentioned even Keon Coleman, like all these guys have some really interesting value this year. What are your thoughts about the rookies?
Yeah, Keon Coleman, I would say, is the only one that I'm kind of down on in terms of like I have not seen him be able to create like separate from like DBs. And that's kind of like what he was scrutinized for before he even got into the league. And it's not translating well. And I just feel like it's a lot of pressure on him, like being that rookie receiver with a dynamic quarterback on a team that's looking to really, really compete and try to win a Super Bowl. I think it's just a lot of pressure for him. That's just my opinion. Do I know that for a fact? No, but I'm kind of off on him. Lad McConkey, I mean, he's never been fully able to stay healthy for a whole year, even in his college career. So that's kind of like my thing with him. But I think he's gonna feast in Herbie, and he's gonna be fine. And the other guys, I think like they're good. Roma Dunze is just like he's a third man out. We'll see what happens, but I think Keenan Allen's kind of like on the down, so I think he's still gonna have value.
So I feel like personally, in terms of tight end values that I love, I've been trying to kind of key in and focus on guys that haven't finished as tight end one, that top 10 position, and guys that will roll over into that position this year. When I think of certain guys, this might be a little more of like an obvious one. I'm really high on Dalton Kincaid this year, being that he's going to be the top pass catcher in Buffalo. Somebody
Mm.
like Mark Andrews also finished outside of the top 10, but again, that's another easy, obvious one. But I feel like in terms of the tight ends that may regress and fall back, I'm a little worried about drafting guys like a David Njoku and Jake Ferguson. Not that I'm not so high on David Njoku and his skill set, but inconsistent QB play is another problem. He really only got activated once Joe Flacco was the quarterback and started absolutely just taking shots down the field to him, and that's when he got really activated as like an elite fantasy tight end. But what are your thoughts about some of the guys that either I mentioned or guys that you feel that you're more particularly high on than I am?
So of the guys you mentioned, like David Njoku, I agree. Like, it's kind of like an old school quarterback in Flacco, like that, like old school pro style offense where they favor the tight end. So like that definitely played a role into it. And it's just like, I don't know what version of Deshaun Watson we're getting. So there's definitely question marks with drafting him. Of the guys you mentioned, yeah, Dalton Kincaid definitely. I feel like everybody's like in on him this year. Like, given Josh Allen and like there's no more Stephon Diggs, like his ADP is appropriate and he's definitely a guy you want to take. Lower rounds, kind of like a sleeper per se. I would say I'm big on Kyle Pitts this year. I feel like he has a good year with Kirk O'Chains. He just loves to feed the tight end. That's just been kind of like his MO anywhere he went. He definitely favored the tight end in his Washington days. He favored Hawkinson and kind of Irv Smith here and there in his Vikings days. And I definitely think the talent that Kyle Pitts is and the value that he has, I think it's also going to translate well. So I think he's a good value. I think Trey McBride is going way too high. I mean, there was no number one receiver in that offense, really. Hollywood Brown was inconsistent as inconsistent can be. Was Trey McBride truly like this flourishing, up and coming tight end? Or was he just a product of, hey, I really don't have anybody else to get the ball to. So, like, here you go. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't think he's worth his ADP.
I agree with that. If there's like one tight end on like that, upper echelon rankings that I'm just not willing to get behind, it would be him. And somebody that I'm just not as high on as everyone else because I feel like there's other elite tight ends is somebody like Sam Laporta. Like obviously he was the best tight end last year. It's going to cost you quite the price tag if you want to land him this year. And he's
Mm.
somebody that really hasn't even practiced all that much this offseason. So I feel like part of that has to go into factoring how good can he finish? Like, how much better can he finish than somebody like Travis Kelce? I feel like I would probably prioritize Travis Kelce over Sam Laporta. Not saying that Sam Laporta isn't like a top three option this year. I just think it's a little too expensive at his ADP price.
I think the tight end position is so rich in general this year that investing a top three pick in a guy like Laporta and a guy, maybe Kelsey, because he does have the history and you are getting him at a discounted price compared to years past. But if you're really going to invest, like, it's not worth it. There's just so many guys. And like, I feel like this is the one time this position is saturated with talent and the discrepancy in points between option one versus option six, per se, and the price that you can get that option at is not going to be huge. So I think just tight ends as a whole, like why are you investing a third round pick in a guy that you can get potentially around six?
We know the elite guys like Kelsey, Kittle, Mark Andrews if he's healthy, like those guys
Yeah,
are just locks to be top 10 options, but there's just no need to take the risk or the expensive price tag on a Laporta or a Trey McBride when you know that like a Kittle's going after and a Kittle has just as good of a chance to finish top three as the
exactly.
rest of the guys and it doesn't cost you nearly as much.
Exactly, exactly. Or you get a guy like, I mean, I know people are out on him and he's like way down the list. Dallas Goedert. I mean, I'm not saying that he's gonna be this like, oh my God, tight end, but he has shown he can do it and he can give you enough fantasy value where that if you have solid receivers and backs way in those later rounds, he gives you good value for where he's going.
I agree with that. I may not be as high on Dallas Goedert as you are. You definitely persuaded me, more as the weeks have gone by
Yeah.
to kind of, feel comfortable at least taking him in best ball if I see him available
Yeah,
and I'm in
yeah.
need of a tight end. But somebody that I like, basically going in that same range as him, is Pat Freiermuth. Like we've seen Pat Freiermuth finish as a top fantasy tight end before.
Mhm.
Injuries really derailed him last season and never really got him off of the ground. A healthy Pat Freiermuth, everyone knows that, for lower QB play, you're obviously just going to be funneling the tight ends because you just don't have like, not saying Russell Wilson isn't a great deep ball passer because he obviously is, but you're going to lean on your tight end, especially when you're in a new situation, in a new offense. It's interesting to me because we obviously know George Pickens is going to take a lot of targets, but who else is going to come for the ride in the passing offense? Like, I feel like Pat Fryermuth is in an interesting spot where he could be the second most targeted Steeler on his team as long as he's healthy. And that could end up being like a tight end 8, tight end 9 finish. I'm not saying that I think he's going to be like a top 5 guy, but if you like, waiting for a tight end, maybe somebody takes your Njoku pick, or maybe you
Right.
wanted like Jake Ferguson and they're not there anymore. Like, I'd feel comfortable with taking Pat Fryermuth. Not saying I'm not comfortable with Goddard, but I slightly, give the favor a little bit more to Pat Fryermuth because I feel like he doesn't have to worry about as many, mouths to feed in his offense as like a Dallas Goddard does.
For sure, for sure. And I understand that too. And it's like the tight end's always the quarterback's best friend, and regardless who starts for the Steelers. I mean, you look at Fields' time in Chicago, he liked Cole Kmet. I mean, he found him a good amount, especially you saw the chemistry translate over the years. Russell Wilson, and you look at Arthur Smith's offense, they do like the tight end. They just hated Kyle Pitts. I mean, if you're really looking to punt the position, you can go Pat Freiermuth, Dalton Schultz goes in that range, and Goddard. And it's pick of the litter. Kind of same thing with that tier of running backs we talked about earlier.
For sure.
Whichever one you favor more, by all means, if your heart tells you to go with that one, pick that one and keep it moving. Yeah, man, that's really it for that. Tight ends are solid. I mean, the receiving class this year is quite deep. I think there's a fall off, like we talked about earlier. Like you have your like top 6 guys, and then there's a gap, and then all these guys are kind of pulled together, and then there's another gap, and then you have your frequent flyers that you kind of take in every draft in later rounds. So running back is I feel more running back's pretty deep this year.
I feel like I'm more inclined to get my wide receivers early this year and then
Yeah.
settle for some of those late round running backs. Like I said before, just kind of shoot my shot on some of these other guys.
B Rob is good. Brian Robinson.
I love Brian Robinson.
I think he's gonna have like a solid year. Devin Singletary is not bad. I mean, who else? Who the hell's gonna take carries away from him?
Apparently, Tyrone Tracy might end up turning into a goal line back, but till
Yeah,
I see it for sure, I'd rather just, trust the guy that, maybe he's not the most efficient, but effective with the
hate
volume
him.
he's given in a Devin Singletary.
Exactly. And the coaching staff loves him, and he spent time with him in Buffalo, and now they're here in the Giants organization. So I think it's a win-win, and he's a late round flyer that if you want a bench piece or you want him to be your running back too, if you go hero running back, he has the volume.
So basically, to kind of wrap it up, we definitely like more of like the running back values towards the end of the draft. If we could get
Yeah.
all, 3 to 4 wide receivers before like round 8, we'd be really happy with that. And then we
Yeah.
could kind of figure out, later on, do I need a quarterback? Did I fade tight end, get one of those guys, and then just start hammering the running back position from there?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a good plan. I mean, granted, like I say, it really depends where you draft, what's going on around you, and just always paying attention, keeping up with the board. You should, I don't think walking into a fantasy draft, aside from besides your first and second round pick, you should never have a plan. Because yes, that can set you up for success, but if you're so glued to a plan and having like, this is what I'm going with, you can miss out on value picks, you can miss out on just people slipping and just being cognizant of the board and who you're around. So I'm more of like get your guy round 1, get your guy round 2. The rest you can mock all you want. You're gonna walk out with something completely different.
I totally agree. You could do 1 million mocks, but none of those million mocks could match up to, the
What
players
you're
that
gonna
come off of the board when you're actually picking or you're on the clock. But be willing to take anyone at any given time because you just don't know what's going to be available for you.
agreed. And like even for myself, I'm guilty of it sometimes. There's always going to be players you love or that you're in love with per se. That there's like you just love that player, but you have to be smart enough to be like separate emotion from rationale in a sense. And it's like do the make the smart pick, make the smart decision, or the pick that has enough statistical analysis and data to back it up
I
to
agree.
make
And I feel
decisions.
like looking at the opposite side of the coin, if you were someone that was, spited by a T. Higgins last year, you can't let your emotions of T. Higgins gave me a really bad season last year affect you missing out on him because of
On
the
T.
potential
Higgins.
that
Yeah.
he brings. Or like somebody like me, we could talk about my draft last year. I drafted Cooper Kupp in the first round before the injury news, took a bad turn and I
Yeah.
ended up getting, messed up because I took Cooper Cup. Luckily, I had Puka, but still I wasn't able to get back on track at all because my other picks weren't as good. But for someone like me, I went into the, April, May, June, and I was like, no, I will not have Cooper Cup. But as July and August started to roll around, I was like, I really have to decipher my emotions and my experiences with what happened with this player because then I miss out on the opportunity to grab somebody who's better than what their ADP is, all because of like an emotion. And that kind of
Emotion.
follows with somebody like Brandon Ayuk. I unfortunately, if you remember, I was in our league the one who had him when he was in the quote doghouse. And I was like, you know what? Like, I really can't trust somebody who's just going to be pulled from a starting lineup at any given moment because of that. Whatever happened, we don't really know exactly what went
Yeah.
on. And now 2023 rolls around, I have no interest in grabbing a Brandon Ayuk, and I definitely learned from that because he was an elite wide receiver last year in fantasy.
Yeah. And I'm not putting salt in the wound, but AJ Brown. And we'll just leave it at that. We won't even have to discuss it.
Thank you guys so much for watching, but more importantly, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Eber, the fantasy genius and PhD in fantasy, but also MD in real life. I
That's for
like that
sure.
little wordy intro. I thought that was great. So, thank you so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it. Do you have anything that you want to say before we sign off?
Man, just thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate the channel. I wish you like the utmost success. I can't wait to do this more with you. And I'm really excited for the viewers to get this content out there and just like basically improve on it from like any given opportunity that we have and just like give more of an insight of like how we think about fantasy football and just like our various perspectives of which players to target, which players to play and things of that nature and just like trusting yourself and being like you said flexible with what you do. But this was an awesome opportunity. It was amazing to talk about an array of different topics and I just appreciate your time and everybody watching this. Thank you for your support to Outlier and our man Turtle.
Of course. Well, first, this can't be possible without you. So definitely give yourself the little pat on the back for
Got
yourself.
it.
You did an awesome job. If you guys like this video and you want to see more content with me and Eber like this, where we kind of break down fantasy football, whether we go into like a week by week, guys that we like in certain weeks or don't, or just as the season goes on, any major updates, we can provide, a video like this. So let me know if you like content like this, smash the like button, and we'll be sure to make more of it in the future. If you're new here and you feel like you want to subscribe to the channel, make sure you do so because it's not even just me at this point, but I had to take away a doctor from his actual real life job who's very important in the real world. And I don't want him to think that he wasted his time for a couple hundred viewers. So if you liked it and you appreciated his time, subscribe at least for this guy if you're not going to subscribe for this guy. Thank you guys so much. That's all we have for today. We're signing out. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Peace.
Thank you. Thank you. Never a waste of time. Hey, even for those couple hundred, every little counts. We're gonna make
Love the energy. Thank you so
it.
much, brother. Hope you have a great, wonderful rest of your night.
Thank you too.